The dust hung in the air like a judgment. Bill Turner stood at the edge of the county auction grounds, his weathered hands gripping the $50 bill in his pocket, the last money he had in the world. The sun beat down on Dry Gulch with the kind of merciless heat that turned hope to ash, and Bill had learned long ago that hope was a luxury he couldn't afford. But today he needed something, a mule maybe, something cheap and sturdy that could help him work the 20 acres that were all that remained of what had once been a thriving ranch. The auction grounds sprawled across a dirt lot on the outskirts of town, where livestock changed hands and fortunes shifted in the time it took a gavel to fall. Ranchers in clean Stetsons stood alongside dealers with clipboards, their eyes calculating value in pounds and potential. Bill didn't belong among them anymore. His clothes were worn thin, his boots held together with duct tape, and the lines on his face told the story of a man who'd watched everything slip through his fingers. His wife, Margaret, had been gone 3 years. Cancer had taken her slowly, expensively, draining their savings dollar by dollar until there was nothing left but medical bills and memories. Bill had sold the cattle first, then the equipment, then parcels of land, until all that remained was the small house and a barn that leaned to one side like a drunk trying to find his way home. He was 68 years old and alone. The auctioneer's voice crackled through the loudspeakers, pulling Bill from his thoughts. Big Ed Murphy, a man whose gut preceded him into every room and whose voice could wake the dead 3 counties over, stood on the platform with a microphone, working the crowd like a preacher at a tent revival. "All right, folks, we got some prime livestock coming up next. Got a breeding pair of Herefords, young and ready. Who'll start me at 2,000? Bill watched the bidding with detachment. 2,000 might as well have been 2 million. The morning wore on. Horses came and went, their prices climbing higher than Bill could imagine. A gelding went for 800. A mare with good bloodlines fetched 1,200. Bill's hope of finding anything useful within his budget dwindled with each lot. And then Big Ed's voice changed. "All right, folks, now we come to lot 99. There was amusement in his tone, the kind that comes before a punchline. "And I'll be honest with you, this one's a mercy sale. Somebody dumped her at the holding pens 3 days ago. She's been treated for parasites, but beyond that..." He trailed off, letting the silence speak. The crowd was ready to laugh, but Bill was about to make a decision that would leave them all silent. But real quick, before the gate opens. If you believe that every living thing deserves a second chance, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now, let's see what stepped out into the ring. The gate opened, and a handler led out a horse that made the crowd murmur. She was a mare, though calling her a horse felt generous. Skin stretched over protruding ribs, each bone visible like rungs on a ladder. Her coat was patchy with mange, the hair falling out in clumps to reveal raw, inflamed skin beneath. She walked with her head hanging low, each step an obvious effort, her hooves overgrown and cracked. One eye was swollen nearly shut. "Now, I know what you're thinking," Big Ed continued, his voice booming across the grounds. "You're thinking, Ed, why are you wasting our time with this? And that's fair, but county regulations say we gotta auction everything that comes through, so here she is, pre-glued and ready for the renderer." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Bill felt something twist in his chest. The mare's condition reminded him of those final weeks with Margaret, when the disease had hollowed her out until she was barely there, just bones and determination. The doctors had looked at her the same way these ranchers were looking at this horse, like something already lost. Big Ed continued his pitch. "Tell you what, folks, I'm feeling generous. Who'll give me $5 for this fine specimen? $5, and she's yours to do with as you please. Hell, I'll even throw in a sympathy card." More laughter. Someone in the back shouted, "That's $5 too much?" Bill watched the mare. She stood in the center of the ring, head down, swaying slightly. Defeated, forgotten. Worth nothing to anyone. And then she lifted her head. Just for a moment, her good eye found Bill in the crowd, and in that eye, he saw something that stopped his breath. Not resignation, not defeat. Defiance. A fierce, intelligent awareness that said she was still here, still fighting, still worth something, even if no one else could see it. It was the same look Margaret had given him the last morning, when she'd squeezed his hand and whispered, "Don't you give up. Promise me." "Going once at $5, Big Ed called. "Going twice, $10, Bill heard himself say. The crowd turned. Faces swiveled toward him, some curious, most amused. Big Ed squinted against the sun, trying to identify the bidder. "Did I hear $10?" Big Ed's voice carried disbelief and delight in equal measure. $10, Bill repeated, louder this time. Big Ed grinned like a cat with cream. Well, well, we got ourselves a bidder, folks. Anyone want to make it 15? Silence. No one was foolish enough to compete. Going once at $10, going twice. Big Ed's gavel hung in the air. Sold to the gentleman in the back for $10 whole. Sir, you just bought yourself a funeral on 4 legs. The crowd laughed again, harder this time. Bill felt their eyes on him as he made his way to the payment station, felt their judgment and pity. The clerk took his money with a sympathetic smile that made him want to disappear. "You'll need a trailer," she said gently. "Don't have one." "Oh." Her face fell. "Further?" "It's 5 miles back to town." "I know." Bill collected the mare's lead rope from the handler, who handed it over with barely concealed relief. "Good luck," the man muttered. "You'll need it." The mare stood where they'd left her, head down again, sides heaving. Bill approached slowly, the way he'd approach anything wounded and wary. "Hey there," he said softly. "Looks like we're stuck with each other." She didn't react. He clipped the lead rope to her halter, a frayed thing that had seen better decades, and gave a gentle tug. She followed, though each step seemed to cost her. The walk back to his ranch took 3 hours. Bill had thought it would take 2, but he hadn't accounted for how slowly the mare would move, how often she'd need to stop and rest. They walked along the shoulder of Route 14, the afternoon sun hammering down, heat waves rising from the asphalt. Cars passed, some slowing to stare, others honking as if to hurry them along. Bill didn't hurry. He matched his pace to hers, stopping when she stopped, waiting when she needed to breathe. His own body ached, his knees, his back, his feet in those taped-together boots. But he kept going because she kept going. "We're almost there," he told her as his ranch came into view. "Not much to look at, but it's home." The mare's good eye found his face, and Bill could have sworn she understood. The barn was cooler than outside, though not by much. Bill led the mare into the only functional stall and filled a bucket with water from the well. She drank carefully at first, then desperately, and he had to pull it away before she made herself sick. "Easy now, you'll get more in a minute." He stood back and really looked at her in the dim light of the barn. The mange was worse than he'd thought. The overgrown hooves, the visible malnutrition, the infections in the raw patches where hair had fallen out. A vet would cost money he didn't have. Medicine would cost money he didn't have. Proper feed would cost money he didn't have. But he had oatmeal. He had a stream that ran through the back 40. He had time and stubbornness and a refusal to let another living thing die on his watch. "We'll figure it out," he told her. That night, Bill cooked a pot of oatmeal and split it between 2 bowls. One for him, one for the mare. It wasn't enough for either of them, but it was what he had. He sat in the barn on an overturned bucket and watched her eat slowly, carefully, like she'd forgotten what food was. "You need a name," he said. "Can't just call you horse or mare. That's not respectful." She paused in her eating, one ear swiveling toward his voice. "What about lady?" The name came without thinking. Margaret used to say she felt like a lady when Bill called her that, back when they were young and the world was full of promise. "Yeah, lady suits you. You've got bearing, even beat down as you are." The mare, Lady, went back to eating. That first week was an education in poverty and determination. Bill woke before dawn each morning and walked the mile to the creek to fill buckets with water, hauling them back to the barn because his well pump had died and he couldn't afford to fix it. He shared his meals with Lady, oatmeal for breakfast, stale bread for lunch, thin soup for dinner. He researched mange treatments at the library's computer and made homemade remedies from sulfur and oil. He worked on her hooves with files and patience, trimming away the overgrowth bit by bit. The neighbors noticed. Tom Bradley drove by one afternoon and stopped his truck, leaning out the window with a mixture of concern and judgment on his weathered face. "Bill, what the hell are you doing?" Bill looked up from where he was applying oil to Lady's coat. "What's it look like?" "Looks like you're wasting away taking care of an animal that's already dead, just doesn't know it yet." Tom shook his head. "Everyone in town's talking, saying you've lost your mind." "Maybe I have. That horse is never going to be worth anything. She's too far gone. Bill's hands never stopped their careful work. Worth isn't always about money, Tom. When you're broke, it is. Tom's voice softened. Look, I know you're lonely since Margaret passed. I know it's hard. But this ain't the answer. This horse is just gonna drain whatever you got left and then die anyway. Let her go before you follow her into the ground. Thanks for the concern, Bill said flatly. Tom drove away shaking his head, but Bill kept going. He brushed Lady's coat every evening, talking to her the way he used to talk to Margaret. He told her about the ranch as it used to be, when there were 50 head of cattle and enough money to hire help during harvest. He told her about Margaret's laugh and the way she used to sing while cooking. He told her his fears about losing the ranch, about dying alone and forgotten. Lady listened. She stood still under his hands, her breathing calm, her good eye often turned toward his face. And slowly, impossibly, she began to change. The mange responded to treatment. The raw patches began to heal, and new hair grew in where there had been bare skin. Bill expected it to be brown or black, typical of ranch horses in this region. But the hair that grew back was silver, not gray like an aging horse. Silver. A brilliant, shimmering metallic silver that caught the light and threw it back like moonlight on water. As more of her coat filled in, Bill realized the color was unlike anything he'd seen in 40 years of working with horses. Her body changed too. The ribs slowly disappeared under healthy muscle. Her neck arched where it had hung limp. She grew taller, her legs longer, her entire frame suggesting elegance and refinement rather than the common working stock Bill had assumed she was. By the third month, Lady had transformed into something that made Bill stop and stare. She moved across the pasture with a grace that seemed impossible, a high stepping gait that made her look like she was floating rather than walking. Her silver coat gleamed in the sun, and when she ran, which she did more often now, joy returning to her body, she moved with a fluidity that defied explanation. "What are you?" Bill asked her one evening, watching her gallop across the field. "You're not just some ranch horse someone dumped. You're something else." Lady tossed her head as if agreeing. The answer came on a Tuesday afternoon in early November. Bill was repairing a section of fence near the road when he heard the distinctive sound of a tire blowing out. He looked up to see a black luxury SUV limp to a stop on the shoulder, its driver's side rear tire completely flat. A man emerged, 50s, expensive casual clothes, the kind of person who didn't belong on rural routes. He stood looking at the tire with the helpless expression of someone who'd never changed one in his life. Bill walked over. "Need help?" The man looked up, relief flooding his face. "Oh, thank God. Yes, please. I'm not even sure where the spare is." "Probably under the cargo floor," Bill said. "Let me take a look." They introduced themselves as Bill located the spare. The man was Dr. Robert Harrison, a professor of equine genetics at State University on his way to visit a breeding operation 2 counties over. "I appreciate this," Dr. Harrison said as Bill jacked up the vehicle. "I'm completely useless with mechanical things. Give me a genetic sequencer and I'm fine. But a tire iron?" He laughed self-deprecatingly. Bill worked in comfortable silence, the way he'd done mechanical work his whole life. Dr. Harrison made small talk, asking about the area, commenting on the landscape, the usual things strangers said while waiting. And then Dr. Harrison turned to look at Bill's property. His face changed. The color drained from his cheeks. His mouth opened slightly. The wrench he'd been holding clattered to the pavement. What is that?" Bill followed his gaze. Lady was in the near pasture, about 100 yards away, running along the fence line with that impossible floating gait, her silver coat blazing in the afternoon sun. "That's Lady," Bill said. "My horse." "Your horse," Dr. Harrison repeated, his voice strange. Could I possibly take a closer look?" "Sure, I guess." Bill had never seen anyone move with such urgent intensity while trying to appear calm. Dr. Harrison walked quickly toward the fence, his expensive loafers collecting dust, his eyes never leaving Lady. When he reached the fence, he stopped and just stared. Lady, curious about the stranger, trotted over. Dr. Harrison's hands trembled as he reached out, his movements slow and careful. "May I?" he asked, glancing at Bill. "Go ahead." Dr. Harrison touched Lady's neck, his fingers exploring the contours with professional precision. He checked her teeth, counting them, examining their structure. He studied her eyes, her ears, the way her neck connected to her shoulders. And then he found something near her throat, a distinctive swirl of hair that made him inhale sharply. "Where did you get this horse?" His voice was tight, controlled, like a man trying not to shout. Bill told him, "The auction. Lot 99, $10, the walk home." Dr. Harrison closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "Mr. Turner, do you have any idea what you have here? A horse I saved from the renderer?" "No." Dr. Harrison pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "You have something impossible." Dr. Harrison swiped through his phone, pulled up images, and held them out to Bill with a hand that trembled. "This," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "is an akal teke." The images showed horses with the same impossible metallic coat, the same elegant build, the same high-stepping gait Bill had seen in Lady. They were magnificent creatures, photographed in professional settings, their coats gleaming gold and silver and bronze. "They're from Turkmenistan," Dr. Harrison continued, speaking faster now. "One of the oldest horse breeds in the world, bred for over 3,000 years in the desert. They're called the golden horses because of their metallic coats, a unique genetic trait no other breed possesses." Bill stared at the images, then at Lady, then back at the images. "That can't be right. She was dumped at a county auction. Nobody dumps expensive horses." "Not dumped," Dr. Harrison corrected. "More likely stolen as a foal and abandoned when she got sick. These horses are worth—" He trailed off, pulling up another page. "Look at this. This is from an auction last year in Dubai. A similar mare, same coloring, same build. She sold for $2.3 million. The number didn't make sense. Bill's brain couldn't process it. "Million?" "Million," Dr. Harrison confirmed. He turned back to Lady, his professional demeanor slipping into something like wonder. "There are maybe 3,000 of these horses in the entire world. In the United States, probably fewer than 500. They are critically endangered. Every single one is registered, tracked, their bloodlines documented. When one goes missing," he gestured at Lady. "When one goes missing, the entire international Akalteke community searches. This mare should have been found months ago." "Maybe she's not what you think," Bill said, though his heart knew it was a weak argument. Dr. Harrison shook his head. "The swirl on her throat? That's a genetic marker specific to the Turkmen lines. The way she moves, that floating gait is called the desert glide, unique to the breed. The metallic sheen, that's caused by a unique protein structure in the hair shaft. No other horse has it. She's purebred Akalteke, no question." He turned to Bill, his expression serious. "Mr. Turner, I need to make some calls. The Akalteke Association needs to know about this. And you—" He paused. "You need to understand what this means. This horse is worth more than most people's homes. She has breeding potential. Her foals would be worth hundreds of thousands each. The right buyer would pay anything for her." Bill looked at Lady. She stood at the fence, her silver coat catching the late afternoon light, her intelligent eyes watching the two men with curiosity, but no fear. "I'm not selling her." Dr. Harrison blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" "I said I'm not selling her." "Mr. Turner, I don't think you understand." "I understand fine." Bill's voice was quiet but firm. "She was dying. Everyone had given up on her. I took her home and cared for her when she had nothing, and she gave me a reason to keep going when I had nothing. That's not something you put a price on." "But—" "No buts." Bill met the professor's eyes. "She's family. That's worth more than money." Dr. Harrison opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I understand. But, Mr. Turner, you should know. Once I make those calls, people are going to come. Breeders, collectors, the Akalteke Association itself. They're going to offer you amounts of money that will seem impossible to refuse. Let them come." The calls were made, and they came. By the next afternoon, Bill's ranch, which hadn't seen a visitor besides Tom Bradley in months, became a parade ground for luxury vehicles. First came the Akalteke Association's regional representative, a woman named Dr. Melissa Grant, who documented Lady with cameras and genetic tests. Then came breeders from 3 states away, their eyes gleaming with the arithmetic of bloodlines and profit. Local media arrived, having caught wind of the story, and suddenly Bill's ordinary tragedy was news, and Big Ed came. The auctioneer arrived in his truck with mud flaps and too loud engine, his face red with what might have been embarrassment or anger. Bill couldn't tell which. He stood at the fence, staring at Lady in her transformed glory, and for once in his life, Big Ed had nothing to say. "Hell of a thing," he finally managed. "Yeah," Bill agreed. "I had no idea. Nobody did." The buyers made their offers. They started at $50,000 and climbed quickly. 100,000. 200,000. Dr. Grant quietly informed Bill that the association could facilitate a sale that would guarantee him financial security for the rest of his life and contribute to the preservation of an endangered breed. "You'd be doing a good thing," she said gently, "helping save these horses." Bill listened to them all. He accepted their business cards, nodded at their arguments, let them make their cases, and when they were done, he gave them the same answer he'd given Dr. Harrison. "She's not for sale. But Mr. Turner, she was worth everything when she was worth nothing," Bill said, his hand resting on Lady's silver neck. "I'm not going to forget that just because other people suddenly see her value. She's my family. That's not negotiable." One by one, they left. Some frustrated, some respectful, all of them shaking, their heads at the stubborn old man who wouldn't accept common sense. Tom Bradley was the last to come by, 3 days after the circus had moved on. He stood at the fence with Bill, both of them watching Lady graze in the golden light of late afternoon. "You know you're the talk of the county, right?" Tom said. "I figured. Half the people think you're noble. The other half think you're the biggest fool who ever lived. What do you think?" Tom was quiet for a long moment. I think maybe I was wrong about worth, about what matters." He glanced at Bill. "She looks happy. You look happy. Maybe that's enough." "It is enough." After Tom left, Bill sat on his porch in the cooling evening, watching Lady in the pasture. She grazed peacefully, her coat shimmering in the dusk, occasionally lifting her head to look at the house where Bill sat. His ranch was still struggling, the barn still leaned, his boots still needed tape, but Lady was healthy and strong, and Bill wasn't alone anymore. The impossible horse who'd been hours from death had given him something he thought he'd lost forever. Purpose, connection, hope. "Margaret would have liked you," he said quietly, though Lady was too far away to hear. "She always said the broken things were worth fixing, worth fighting for. I think she'd be proud I listened." Lady lifted her head then, as if she'd heard despite the distance. Her silver coat caught the last rays of sun, and for a moment she looked like something from a dream, impossible, mythical, precious beyond measure. Bill smiled. His last $50, spent on a dying horse everyone had laughed at, turned out to be the best investment he'd ever made. Not because she was worth millions, but because she was worth living for. And sometimes that was worth more than all the money in the world.